Welcome to the Spa Girls podcast, the self-publishing podcast for authors. You're in the right place for the best writing, marketing, and publishing advice, plus interviews with industry experts and best-selling authors. I'm Cheryl Phipps.
I'm Shah Barrett.
And I'm Trudy J. And this week we have Mark Leslie Lefebvre with us. Hello.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
I'm excited to be here. I
Yay.
mean, I'm excited to be here in a deep voice. There you go.
Yeah.
Much better. Yep. So I'll read out your bio just in case there's anyone out there who's had their head stuck under a rock or something for the last however many years. And then we'll get on with the interview. So, Mark Leslie Lefebvre is a horror and speculative fiction author, as well as a professional speaker and bookseller with more than 30 years of experience in writing, publishing, and bookselling. Between 2011 and 2017, most people would recognize his face and his voice as Mark from Kobo. 100%, that's exactly it. And then since 2018, when he started at Draft to Digital as Director of Business Development, he's been called Mark to Digital, mostly because his surname is difficult for non-French speakers to spell and pronounce, which is quite funny. But regardless of which hat Mark is wearing, he usually defaults to the title of book nerd and continues to be a passionate storyteller, both in the fiction and non-fiction realms. So welcome to the show.
It is an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So let's start at the beginning, go back into the day. How did you get into
There's this
writing?
tunnel, and I
Yeah.
saw this light,
Yeah.
and I screamed. Okay,
Maybe
maybe not that
not
far back.
quite
Maybe
that far.
fast
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. How did you get into writing and self-publishing in particular? What drew you there?
Yeah, I mean, I was always telling myself stories as a kid, little Fisher-Price figures, and then it became little sketch cartoons, and I was not a good artist. It turned into stories, and yeah, my first submission at the age of 13, my first rejection. That as well. Thousands of rejections later. And back in the day, the advice for writers was if you want to sell a book, you need to get some short stories published. You need to build your cred, your street cred by getting your work into magazines or anthologies or whatever it was. And then an agent will actually take you seriously. And I followed that advice. And in 1992, after years of rejections, because I think I started in around roughly 84, 85, sending submissions away. And it wasn't until 1992 that I had my very first short story published. That's also the same year I started working in the book industry. So these parallel careers happened. And don't worry, I've got a point to this story. This is how I got into self-publishing is I was working in the book industry and people would come into the bookstore and say, "So you're a writer?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm a writer." I'd be all excited about it. And they'd look around the store as if my books might be in the store, but all I had was short stories published in various small press magazines that were not available like in major bookstores. They're available in really small markets, circulation 500, that kind of thing. And so I said, enough's enough, gosh darn it. And so in 2004, I took a bunch of my previously published short stories and I put them in a book. I created a company called Stark Publishing. My best friend Steve, and me, Mark, Steve and Mark, we had a DJ company in uni. Did I say that right?
Yeah, very good.
When we were in uni. We had a DJing company called Stark Entertainment, and we DJed with cassette tapes and stuff like that. And that was our dream was that one day we'd have a company called Stark Entertainment. And he went into graphic design, and I did the writing thing. And so he designed the logo for me. It cost me, and he designed the cover of my book. It was $24, which is was the price of a case of beer back in the day. And I used Stark Publishing to hide the fact that I was self-publishing. Ebooks were not a thing yet for indie authors. Ebooks kind of existed, but they didn't really become a thing till much later. Probably almost not quite 10 years later, but 6, 7, 8 years later. So I made it available as a print-on-demand self-published book, and that's when I started. And that was called One Hand Screaming. And just last year, I celebrated the 20th anniversary of One Hand Screaming. And I thought, whoa, in the last 20 years, I've published a lot more short stories. So I did a twice the size, edition, anniversary edition, new cover, Bloody Your Eye, because the original cover was just a picture of my eye with a skull in it. Now it was my eye with a skull in it with a lot more blood because, blood, sweat, and tears of a writer. and I called it 20 Haunting Years. And so, it's more than twice the size. It has stories I've published in the last 20 years and stories behind the stories as well as original art. And it was really exciting for me to celebrate the 20th anniversary of self-publishing before the cool kids started doing it, right? I was in the early days. And it's really just been a growth for me. So while my career on the book side of things was going in that direction and going really well, I've had some great experiences there. My experience as a writer has similarly grown. And I think it was 2004 I self-published my first book, but 2006 was my first traditionally published book. I'd edited a science fiction and fantasy anthology. And so I've maintained that parallel of the bookseller guy, the guy who works with traditional publishers, and the guy who self-publishes. So I'm very lucky in that I sort of have the best and worst of all worlds.
Yeah.
I think gives you a 360-degree look, plus an awesome, really cool logo. So if anybody, or you should be going to YouTube and watching this if you're listening.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
it
very
is.
cool.
I love that logo
Yeah,
actually.
it's the pen. I love the pen that
It's
Steve
so
put
cool.
in the R for
It,
Stark.
you
So,
know
and
that
that's just
we,
been my brand. Yeah,
yeah,
ever
it's so
since.
cool. It's so cool.
Even just the word Stark. I mean, I wasn't expecting to have such a cool meaning behind it because I just like the word by itself. So that's very
Yeah.
cool.
And it worked out well for my podcast, Stark Reflections on Writing and
Yeah.
Publishing,
Yeah.
because I like to take an honest and open look at the pros and cons of trad and indie, because it's
Mm.
not all sunshine and rainbows.
Mm.
So let's start with that. Like, I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes in the industry in your time, and
Yeah.
even just from when you're at Kobo to now being at Draft Digital and things, even let's say the last 10 years. Can you think of some of the biggest things that you've that have had the most
Yeah.
impact for authors?
The thing that because I pay attention to both sides of the universes of self-publishing and trad or legacy publishing is just how much indie authors are doing the things that the big publishers of today used to do when they
Mm.
first
Mm.
started. Experimental publishing, experimenting and doing new things. Like Simon
Mm.
and Schuster was born out of the desire to experiment and say, and it's sort of niche publishing. And let's do crossword puzzle books because they don't exist, and we're gonna remortgage our houses and invest in crossword puzzle books because we're pretty sure people will want to do them more than just Sundays when they're in the big Sunday newspaper. And if you think about that, that's niche publishing. It's experimental publishing. You think about Penguin introducing paperbacks, classics that were actually affordable, not really expensive classics that only the rich could afford, but making classics affordable. And we all still respect Penguin as a high literary power. Well, it's one of the world's largest. It's the world's largest publisher, Penguin Random House right now for English language. And then you think about even Random House itself, were a couple of guys who just wanted to publish a few books on the side at random. So when you look at what indie authors are doing, they're doing very similar things. They're experimenting with prices and formats and styles. They're experimenting with direct Kickstarters and stuff like that. And many of them are working building these little small empires. A lot of authors who know what they're doing are also turning around and helping other authors. And I'm seeing them sort of building these little legacies up where they're going to be the big publishers of the future
Mm.
because they're building in the same way. It was just, oh, we're just publishing for passion and niche and experimentation, and then it becomes this big business. And we've seen that out of the self-publishing sphere. We've seen people who've become these mega entities and then go on to work with other authors and publish other authors. And I love that. I love that similarity because I should be the old cranky guy who says, "Ah, these kids don't know what they're doing." That kind of stuff. I think every new generation of writers and publishers brings new ideas and new hope and new opportunity and a new willingness to experiment.
Mm.
And I love how that pushes the envelope. I mean, Kickstarter's been around for a long time. Most people learned about it because Brandon Sanderson kind of broke the bank with the $44 million one. But what I love about that is it really helps you focus on a niche audience. And I know you had Johnny B Truant on recently
Mm.
talking about the 1,000 true fans. The people were like, no, I want that special edition. And look at what indie authors are doing. And indie authors have been pushing companies like Book Vault and Book Funnel. Like most of the features that come out of Book Funnel are Damon really, astutely listening to what authors need and making it happen for them. And then Book Vault doing the same thing with, well, we're going to do really sexy special editions. And so that's all because indie authors keep pushing things forward. And so, and I'll be honest with you, I was just at the Romance Writers of America conference it was in Niagara Falls, Ontario. So I didn't have to go very far because I'm in Canada. It was like an hour and a half drive from my house, as opposed to having to go somewhere really far in the States. And I remember that it was the romance authors and the romance readers who first adopted ebook strategies. And I always would go to the romance conferences because it's kind of like, I want to know the future. I'm just going to watch what the romance writers do. So
Yeah.
and that hasn't changed.
It's a
Right.
They're
wise
still
man
doing,
that's very true. Yeah.
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 yeah, it's so true.
Mhm.
And again, so paying attention to how can authors and publishers, right? But how can they best serve their readers? And the answer, somewhere in that answer is the next thing that we're going to be doing as authors in the future. It's what we should be doing, and we should continually trying to iterate and get better at. And the more we focus on that, the better we're going to be in our own positions as authors. Because really, and again, maybe I'm just repeating what I'm sure Johnny had already shared with you, but that thought of think about the reader.
Yeah.
Yes, the money will come potentially, but think about the reader first and satisfying the reader. And I would also add to that sort of argument is satisfy yourself
Mm.
because not to be a downer, but it's more likely you will never sell any books. Or maybe you'll be lucky to sell 100 books total ever. Or if you're lucky to make $100 a year, that's a pretty good thing because most people don't. Most books that are published rarely sell. And that's both true for traditional publishing and self-publishing. It's not because of the quality. It's just that's life, unfortunately. That's the way the market is. So if you don't love what you're doing,
Mm.
that's a really hard thing. Because if you hate what you're doing and you put all this energy and time and blood and sweat and tears into it, and then go, ooh, yay, I sold 50 books total. I'm done. As opposed to, I loved everything I did about this process. By the time it comes to making the book available for sale, you've already won because you got to spend your time doing something so incredibly powerful that most people will never do.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
so
such
for
such
me,
a good
passion.
message, Mark. Such a good
Yeah,
message. Thank you for saying that. I think
Yeah.
that's really, and also I guess I would add on to that the importance of celebrating those small wins. And they're not
yeah.
small, maybe small monetarily, but just actually
Mm.
publishing a book is a huge,
That's
huge
huge.
thing.
Yeah.
100%. Most people think they're going to write a book. I mean, we're weirdos, right? We're
Mm.
the weird exceptions that have done it. But you think about your graduating class in high school. How many people in your graduating class in high school have actually written and published a book? Now, maybe I was a small high school. There were 33 people in my graduating class, and three of us actually have published books. So that's
That's a
actually
high
a pretty
stat.
big number. That's a pretty big number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's high. I'm sure I don't know how many people would have
Uh,
done that in my high school. Probably none other
Yeah.
than me.
So so
Yeah.
that so if you're listening to this and you have actually finished writing a book for one, chances are no one else in your graduating class did. And then if you've published anything, whether it's self-published, traditional, it doesn't matter. You've got a book out there that other people can find and read. You're already in the 1 or 2%. And I know it's cold comfort. You're like, yeah, but I want to sell more. It doesn't matter. I mean, like, yes, that matters. That's cool. But my God, take some time to
yeah.
celebrate your incredible accomplishment.
Yeah.
I'm damn proud of you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Because otherwise it becomes a grind. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
actually, there's lots of other things you could do to actually make more money than being an author, usually. Unless you're
Yeah.
one of the people who kind of, yeah.
Well,
But
a job is like 9 to 5, isn't it? But
mm,
it's not as an author. It's just not. So you
No.
already chose the harder road.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
if I wanted guaranteed money, I could go get a job at a burger joint down
yeah,
the street. That's guaranteed money. I put time in, I make money. I
yeah,
put time into this book, who knows?
yeah,
And I've written enough books, right? I've got close to 40 books out now. Some
Mm,
of them have made money.
mm,
isn't that funny?
mm,
So what are the because there is this romanticized version of being an author that you know that we see that
Yeah,
there's these the big hitters out there making all these millions, and we kind of
yeah.
a lot of people get into it expecting that. So
mm.
maybe we could talk about the romanticized version versus kind of maybe some of the realities of being an author in 2025.
Yeah, the romanticized version. It's funny. People used to say back in the good old days of publishing, where all a writer had to do is write their manuscript and send it away and never have to think about it. Well, that was never true. I
No.
mean, maybe it was a little bit more true, but that was a fantasy to begin with, because they still had to do work. They still had to do book tours and stuff like that. The sad thing for me that I see way too much of, and again, it's I'm happy because there are people who are making really good money, and I'm so happy for them. I'm thrilled. I know so many people who, are five and six and seven figure authors, and I'm
Mm,
so thrilled for them and for their readers, and that they can do something they love, and that's great. But the reality is that, and again, these stats are true for both traditional publishing and self-publishing, is most books published are going to sell less than 100 copies. So if you, as an author listening to this, have already sold more than 100 units of any one of your books, I don't even care if you've given away 100 copies of a first in series for free. You're already ahead of the curve. You're already doing better than you think you are.
mm,
So most books that are published don't sell that much. Most traditionally published books will stay in bookstores for a very limited time window, 6 to 9 months, and then get returned. That's the consignment nature of the book selling business. So as a self-published author, you have this huge advantage that you don't have this window of 6 to 9 months where it has to be successful or else.
Mm.
My novel, I'll give you an example. My novel, Canadian Werewolf in New York, initially, it took me 10 years to finish that one. And when it was published in 2016, finally, after, almost 10 years of writing and then a couple years of back and forth with my editor before it went to market, I did a lot of promotion on it in 2016 all the way through. It wasn't until 2020 that I decided I was going to turn it into a series because I had enough ideas and questions from readers that said, "Oh, what would happen to this character if I put him in other situations?" And in 2020, I sold more copies of that book after I released book two than I sold in the 4 years that it had been out. So the cool thing, to make a long story longer, the cool thing is that this book that was published 4 years earlier didn't start to sell really well till 4 years later, not this
Yeah.
6 to 9 month window. So as indie authors, it goes back to one of my favorite sayings from a bookstore. It was a used bookstore. I grew up in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. And Bay Used Books was there, and they had a little stamp they put on the inside of the books, with their address and phone number to bring books to them. And their slogan was, "A book you haven't read before is a new book."
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
true.
That's so
Mm,
true
mm,
with us indie authors. So it's not about, oh my God, my book launch and I didn't sell a million copies on my book launch. I'm a failure. No, that book can take off years later. You guys familiar, the Queen's Gambit,
Yeah.
the TV series based on
Mm.
with the book from the 70s,
Yeah.
Ah, is it
right?
really? I didn't
So
know
it
it was
doesn't
that.
have to be like
No.
that.
no.
And even more recent, I mean, obviously Bridgerton, the Bridgerton series was popular, but I mean it's
Yes.
reached the masses, same thing with the Black Dagger Brotherhood, people are
Yes.
treating that on social media like it's a brand new thing. I read those books 20 plus years ago. So,
Murderbot
yeah.
Diaries. Yay. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like the thing is that it's this whole new audience. And I
Mm.
used to, it was funny. I was joking with a six-figure author that I know. And this author does really, really well. And this was a point about 5 or 6 years ago. And they were thinking, I think I've tapped out the audience. I don't think there's people I can reach that I haven't reached yet. And I said, I hate to disappoint you, but nobody knows who you are. And
Mm.
that is a good thing
Yeah.
Yeah.
because there's billions of readers out there that have no clue who you are. Okay, you take an example like Mark Dawson, right?
Mhm.
who Mark Dawson's done really, really well. He's well known, selling bazillion copies of his books, and he writes, Lee Child style, Reacher kind of thrillers, right? We all know in the indie author community, we know these figureheads and these people who have made like lots of money selling books and or courses, and but the average reader has never
Mm-hmm.
heard of them. They've
Yeah.
heard of Lee Child, they've heard of Michael Connolly, they've heard the
Yeah.
big name authors. And I don't see that as a negative. I see it as a positive
Hmm.
because that means they haven't discovered it yet. Just like, we're
Yeah.
talking about this new media based on books we've loved from 20 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
purely hypothesis, but I feel like a generation in self-publishing land is probably about 5 years, both for writers and for readers. That's just my theory.
5 years, yeah. And actually, but think about you guys have been around
A
for a
long
few
time.
cycles already,
Hmm.
right? But think
We
about the
have.
people who
Mm.
were around
Mm.
and are no longer around.
Yes,
And
Mm.
a
here's
lot.
the interesting thing that I can see is there were people who were around who came from legacy publishing, did self-publishing, went back to legacy publishing,
Hmm.
and are in and out like that. And there's like, who's this new person? Well, no, they've been around for a long time. They were just on the other side, doing the other
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
We've
Yeah.
never heard of them.
yeah.
And I've even noticed in the self-publishing, there are self-publishing silos of people who have
Yeah.
no idea,
Yeah.
for example, who Hugh Howey is, and that
Hmm.
he was self-published. There's like, oh, the silo, yeah, well, that's him,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know.
it's
And,
so
and and
true.
Hugh hasn't been in the reader in the circles for a while, right? He used to do a lot of talking at different
Mm.
conferences and guest spots on podcasts. I haven't heard him in years. I mean, I
Mm.
still follow him and the adventures he's having on sailing around the world and
Mm-hmm.
loving life to death, but not really involved in the self-publishing sphere. So a lot of new writers would have no idea
Yeah.
Mm.
who some
Yeah.
of these,
Same with
like,
Russell Blake. I used to read him,
yes,
back in the cave woods days. Shout out to anybody that survived that. The Writers
yeah,
Cafe on there.
Even when you think about it, 20 books. Like I've seen posts where Michael Anderle was having to introduce himself and say, actually,
yeah.
I'm
Who
the
are
guy
you?
that started this.
Who
And I'm
started
the
this movement?
yeah, and like I think he might have posted and someone was like, well, who are you to say that? And he's
Who are
like,
you? Yeah, who are you? Who's this
actually,
Michael Underley? No, it's
so
it's so true. Like I think of it's funny. I keep bumping into I bumped into Barbara Freedy and Tina Folsom recently at 20 Books that's now become Author Nation.
mm,
And I remember in the early days,
Hmm.
it was Bella Andre, Barbara
Yeah.
Freedy, Tina Folsom, C.J.
Hmm.
Lyons. Like there
Yes.
were these authors that we all watched and followed and went, ooh,
mm,
look at what they're doing, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
and here's the cool thing: they haven't disappeared. What a lot of them have done, they've gone, they helped a lot of writers by talking about their success and sharing stuff. But the author community can sometimes be toxic. We all know. Sometimes
Hmm.
we get emotional, us writers,
Mm.
and sometimes our emotions get the better of us and clashes happen and stuff. But one of the things that we can always rely on is let's just focus on our readers. And that's what
Yeah.
a lot
Same
of
with
the
Marie
folks will say.
Force. I often
Yeah,
sort of
Murray
put
as well.
that those
Yeah.
guys, they're real big hitters. I think it's had the great fortune to meet Bella Andre, and you could not get a more giving or helpful person. But
Oh,
and she used to be on keyboards, but after a while, and I mean, I know for ourselves, this is our way of giving back to the community, this podcast,
yeah.
and
Mm.
I don't comment on forums and things or because there be trouble ahead,
Mm.
particularly if somebody's asking for a critique or something. It's just like I've learned
Ooh.
the hard way on that one.
mm. Nobody
Yeah,
really
well,
wants a
the great thing is
critique.
that you guys have a brand that people know and trust
Mm.
because you've been doing this this community oriented love fest. It's a love and information fest is how I would describe it, really. When you think about it,
Thank
there's
you.
support,
I'll take
there's
that.
knowledge.
That could be on our t-shirts. I love an information feast.
But right, it's got information and insights and support and engaging, conversation. But it's also fun and
Mm,
enjoyable, right?
Mm.
Because you guys have a dynamic as well that makes that really exciting. But that's something you've been doing for a long time, but that's where you invest your energy, because I know it takes a lot of effort to put out a regular podcast.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
takes away from your writing, doesn't it?
Yes.
It
Yes,
really
it does.
does.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about that reality. How much
Yeah,
more
the
writing can you
reality,
get done?
people, how's it help your book sales? My son said to me once, and it's like, yeah, no, not at
No,
all.
It's not.
no,
It's
no.
not helping your book sales.
No,
It's
it
actually
doesn't.
taking away from it. So
Hmm.
the question I'm going to ask you as I turn the tables and try to become the host is, why do you keep doing this? It's been 10 years.
That's a good question.
Seriously, why? What do you get out of this?
Because we get to meet people like you, we get to have our own sounding boards like right in front of us, and it's all true, like everybody's story is so true to them, but also that it just fosters that empathy, I think, because we are all in the same boat. We might be, going up different channels or on different seas or whatever, but we are all in this together. And I think, we can lift each other up. We can, I love it.
I'm just really nosy and I just like to ask people questions.
It's
Um,
true too.
For me, it's particularly about hearing women's voices, particularly,
Mm,
I don't want to use the word older, but mature women's voices and actually non-American voices too.
yeah.
Love America. I absolutely love American and Americans, but I think, like you're talking about silos before, I think it is you're looking at a different respect, a different angle of publishing and what we have actually access to actually not living in the States, particularly now with, for example, TikTok Shop and things like that. It is a very different publishing landscape that for us, surprisingly, it's like if you don't know, you don't know. But also I think the reason that we've maintained this is we've never tried to be a brand. It's just been us. And we've shared, the absolute, failures as well as successes that we've
Mm,
had, and so I think if you try to put on a persona of professionalism every week, it would be really hard. So we show up and sometimes one of our energy is lower and the others pick us up. So it's a bond. It's basically a giant therapeutic bonding session for us, Mark, to be fair.
we like hanging
But
out with each other, right? And I
but
think
there's no
because there's four
doubt
of
that it
us,
has absolutely impacted
yeah,
our production and our
yes.
income. It really has.
Yeah.
It's so, it's got to still keep delivering to us. And but
Mm.
yeah,
yeah.
it's a complex
But
question,
again, you
Mark, and
wouldn't
it's made me think
probably.
a lot this early in the
But no,
morning.
would you have it any other way? Like, just, yeah, I would probably have written more books if it wasn't working
No.
on this podcast. But
Mm.
you love it so much.
We
Yeah.
love it, and just it gives you a really good perspective of things that you wouldn't get as just an individual, I think. Even just being in groups,
Yeah.
yeah, I
The
think that
variety of authors, the
yes.
variety of suggestions and ways of climbing the mountain. It boggles my mind, and that hasn't changed over the years.
No.
Sometimes you
Yeah.
get, a bit of repetition, but we try really hard not to. We do look at our
Yeah.
guests as what can they offer? What can they offer our listeners?
And I
And
think
now
too,
I
what's
feel like,
also struck, sorry, Trudy, you go.
well, you go first because I'm going to let
Oh,
you
I was just
wrangle
going to
this
say
interview back
also
onto
what's
Mark. So,
yeah. Also what struck me is how many times people keep trying, and I think there's that sort of the real human spirit thing, and I'm talking different pen names, different genres, and that kind of thing, because that's been a theme for particularly those successes that we've had on, and I'm not, and they are successes,
Mm,
but often it's not their first go around. None of them have had these perfect lives where they've got XYZ in the bank to suddenly invest in this.
mm,
A lot of people have managed really difficult life circumstances or, juggling jobs, etc. So I can't think of anybody that's had an easy road to this. So I hopefully that we debunk that as well.
mm.
well, it's interesting because thinking about that line, you mentioned Hugh Howey, and I remember when all of his stuff was coming out, people were like, first time author,
Mm.
this brand new
Yeah,
book.
magic. Yeah.
His first ever book, and it's like, well, actually, he's got 10 books behind him, and this
I
is,
remember when Hugh Howey was working in a bookshop writing his book.
yeah, yeah. So
No, it's
anyway,
so true. And here, but that truly that reminds me of something I learned about the traditional side of publishing. So a friend of mine, Samantha Bailey, had self-published years ago when I was at Kobo. I remember she released her first book. It was a romantic comedy. It was really awesome. It was, she's a great writer, and she'd come to the Kobo Writing Life stuff in Toronto. I remember we were at a Wattpad event, and I knew Margaret Atwood because I'm fortunately enough to have interacted with her several times, and so I was so happy I got to introduce Sam to Margaret Atwood. That's one of my claim to fames.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then just a few years ago, because I have a podcast, I got an advanced reader's copy from Simon and Schuster Canada, and it was an arc of Samantha's new thriller. And when I knew she had been working with an agent to try to sell,
Mhm.
and it was a 10-year process. And on the back of the our advanced reader's copy, I'm sure people know what an ARC is, but just in case, advanced reader's copy. And on the back is marketing copy, and marketing copy says debut author.
Mm.
And I was like,
Wow.
but like this is no, here's the trick.
Mm.
She published her other book under Samantha Bailey, and the new one was published under Samantha M. Bailey. And
Wow.
that's sometimes because it's more exciting to have a debut a book that's author's never been published before,
Yeah.
and that's how the marketing teams lie,
Mm.
basically, and actually can do that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
and again, Sam's amazing. She's awesome. She's had numerous bestseller thrillers with some of the publishers she's worked with as well. And it's so excited. A local library asked if I would interview her in front of an audience, and I'm like, this is a true honor
Yeah.
that I finally get to interview. Went to a place where Margaret Atwood was being interviewed by someone with Sam while we were watching this. And now I get to be the one who gets to
Yeah.
introduce her and talk about how awesome she is as an author.
Yeah.
But again, it's that reality of the world that's a little bit different than that Hugh Howey came out of nowhere with his 10th book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Rebecca Yarros just popped up with Fourth
Yes.
Wing when she'd been writing romance all those years that really didn't, it had an audience, but it wasn't
Wasn't like that.
no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll be able to say that one day, and Mark has been writing for 50 years before he became a USA Today bestselling author.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, how do you, like, like we were talking before, lots of people have dropped out, left the industry that we kind of were around when we started,
Yeah.
or people come and go, and like, what's made you stick around in various ways and forms? But what is it that keeps you here?
You know what? I can't stop. I'm a storyteller. Whether I'm speaking, to an audience, whether I'm being interviewed on a podcast, whether I'm making up stories, whether I'm even researching ghost stories and writing those.
Mm.
I'm a storyteller and I can't get away from it.
Mm.
I learned this about myself I think it was early in the pandemic. I was suffering from writer's block. And I was actually struggling with the books I knew I wanted to, and then there's no shortage of ideas and things I want to write, but I was having trouble. Obviously stuff was going on in the world. It was causing
Yeah.
anxiety.
Yeah.
My partner and I did a parody video. It was a parody of the song "Stuck in the Middle with You" by Steelers Wheel. Are you familiar with that song?
Yeah.
And it was called "Stuck in This House Here with You." And we did it as a duet of a couple like us. We're stuck in our house together, and we're kind of getting sick of one another because we're stuck in this house. And it's kind of like making fun, like she snores and I have stupid dad jokes, and like we're putting up with all the things about one another. But it told a story of how we learned to re-love each other in a new way, or to love the fact that we were stuck together, as opposed to just looking at the anxiety of it all. And again, it was the storytelling aspect of this parody, the Weird Al style parody, and then Liz, who's perfect at doing the videos and stuff like that, and putting the video together and doing the music video. And it was actually I got picked up by a television station in Ottawa that picked it up for the lighter side, and they played clips from the video, and then a whole bunch of people were like, "Oh my God, we saw you guys on TV with your stupid parody." And when I realized one of the powers of writing and storytelling, and this is great because I do a lot of in-person ghost stories, is the reaction. You can see the reaction. You can tell you got someone. You can tell they're on the edge of their seat. I love that so much. It reminds me of my theater days. But it's the same thing with books. Is that and I just had it was funny. I just had somebody one of my novels I got the rights back from a publisher for doing the audiobook, or at least the audiobook rights back. And the narrator just finished the book and said, "Oh my God, this is so disturbing and bizarre, and wow. And I love this character and it was kind of like, that's why I do it. I
Yeah.
love being able to put someone in a place and make them feel something.
Yeah.
And if it's me telling a stupid joke and I make someone roll their eyes, hey, well, I got a reaction,
Mm.
right? And I think that's why I do it. So I'm gonna share another long anecdote. But when I released a book a few years ago, you guys familiar with the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
Yes.
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 So there is a book that John Candy is reading when they first meet at LaGuardia, and he's John Candy is a Canadian actor, and he's reading a
Uh-huh.
book called The Canadian Mountain,
Yes.
Mm.
right? And that's when they meet, right? And he says, "I know you, don't I?" And he says, "Blah blah 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 blah." So I'm a book nerd. I noticed this book, and I was like, "I wonder if that was a real book or a prop book." Ha ha ha! He's Canadian, yada yada yada. And then in the Deadpool movies, Canadian actor Ryan Reynolds,
Hmm.
you see a copy. He's very
Ah, I
Oh,
briefly.
didn't notice that.
You see a copy of this book, and I was thinking it was like the Hollywood telephone number 555.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
555, blah blah blah.
It's a thing.
And I thought it was just a stupid prop book. And so I was like, I'm gonna make it a real book because I love John Hughes movies. I love 80s movies. And this is one of my favorite movies. I watch it at least 2 or 3 times a year. I'm gonna do a trivia book about planes, trains, and automobiles. And I'm gonna call it The Canadian Mountain. It's gonna be just like Pinocchio. It's finally a real book because it's only ever been a prop book. Lo and behold, I have it up for pre-order. Somebody sees the pre-order, they contact me and they said, dude, because he ran a podcast called some Pretty In Podcast, and it was a John Hughes podcast. And he said, no, it was a real book. I got my hands on a copy, and I've even made a replica version of it, and I have all the original art. And by the way, the company that manufactured this in 1984, which was Beeline Editions, went out of business. They filed for bankruptcy. They never filed this book for copyright. And so I got the original artwork. I did my own cover. And instead of it being Northern Tramp, it's Northern Tribute. And it looks almost exactly like this. The book is so old it didn't have a barcode on it.
Yeah.
It's got all the things except, this is the Beeline logo is really the Stark logo.
Oh,
And
that is
Oh.
instead
so
of the,
cool.
the text, it says a trivia guide to planes, trains, and automobiles. And in any case, I did this book out of 100% passion, thinking that perhaps, maybe, now you guys are rare exceptions because you all have heard of the movie, but, and have
How
probably
has
seen the
anybody
movie.
not heard of that
It could be an
movie?
age thing.
Well, there are lots of people. My wife hadn't
Really?
seen it until she met me, right?
Oh.
I'd forced her to watch it multiple times a year now, and she loves it.
I mean,
But
we're at the bottom of the globe. We've heard of
Yeah.
but I did it thinking that maybe there would be 30 other people in the world nerdy enough to love
Hmm.
it, this movie, the way I've loved this movie. And of my self-published nonfiction titles, this is the best-selling one. This is the one that continues to bring in of every one of my books sold the way this book sold. I'd be flying first class around the world and selling gigantic expensive courses saying you too can be a seven-figure author like me because I got lucky. And you can't control luck, but I'm still going to charge you because anyways,
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
because I've done other
That's
books. And I did a book on Die Hard called Yippee MF. And I did one on Christmas Vacation called Merry Christmas, the Crapper Was Full, which is a line Cousin Eddie says in that movie. And right now I'm working on a book on Perfect Strangers, which was an 80s television sitcom that I loved.
Mhm.
Meeting Bronson Pinchot was so exciting.
Yeah.
You know? But anyways, the to make a long story longer again, that book that I thought I didn't care if it sold. All I cared
Mm.
about was putting it together because I was so passionate. I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
The fact that I got to do the thing I loved and I made money was
Mm.
really cool. I love doing the Die Hard book. It has not made as much money. It's still done well. And the Christmas Vacation book has made me some money. Hasn't done spectacularly, nowhere near as well as the Canadian Mounted, but it's kind of like the focus for me is what am I going to have the most fun doing, and how can I put the most passion into this? Not will this make me a lot of money? It would be
yeah.
nice if this book made money. I mean, you pay $3,000, $4,000 for an audiobook. It'd be nice to make your money back on
It
that.
would. It would.
Most of my audiobooks I haven't, right? I've done
Mm.
what, 12, 14 full-length audiobooks, and I've only made my money back on maybe four of them so far. But
Mm.
but I think of the long tail,
That's really
right? Like this
funny,
is
though. The story that you're telling about one book doing really well and not necessarily the others. I've heard many other, and I'm even my books are the same. Like I've got one series that sells really well and other series that don't, even though I love those series just as much as the other
yeah.
one. And I don't really understand why one sells over the other. I went to a Auckland Writers Festival event and they had this man, and his name was Lars something. I can't remember his surname, and he was a Norwegian author come out, and he's a fiction author. I realize he's really haunting, kind of really atmospheric Norwegian.
Scandi
No,
noir.
yeah,
Oh, is
they're
it
like Scandi noir, like
Spencer?
Yeah.
those dark. No, I think it's yeah. I don't want to guess actually, but anyway, and his most famous book, his best-selling book, is a book called Norwegian Wood, and it's literally about how to stack your wood pile, and it just outsells everything
That
he
outsells
does.
all the other cool things.
Yeah, all of these other
Yeah,
amazing
isn't
things he
that
does.
weird?
Yeah, but they're
Yeah.
just really into their wood in Norway, and it's a really big deal to them. They
See, I thought Norwegian Wood would be like a, like an active romance title
Well,
potentially.
I'm pretty sure there are other fiction novels called Norwegian Wood, and I was really confused when he first brought it up, thinking, "Oh, it must be this." And no,
Oh,
it's literally a book about stacking your
Baking.
firewood
wow.
and how
It's
to best
probably
do it.
it's probably more
So
of a
no, we
pop
have no
culture
idea.
book.
We have no idea. And this is the thing about trad publishing. They spend millions of dollars in huge advances in the hopes that every book they're not idiots. They're really brilliant, passionate people who work in the publishing industry,
Yeah, yeah.
and they can't even get it right. So how can
Right.
we
Mm.
know that my Norwegian wood's going to sell better, or my Canadian wood's going to sell better than your
Yeah,
Yeah,
Norwegian
I
maybe
think
you
you
wood?
better
should.
start writing a Canadian stick and wood book there, Mark. Just saying.
Or
Oh
some
man,
version
that is
of.
so funny. You have no idea though. That one series of yours, why does that sell?
Mm.
Is it because you invest more time and energy, or is it just that somehow it hit at the right time? And that's the
Dragons.
thing that luck, the thing that no one ever talks about is
Yeah.
luck.
Yeah.
Johnny, the reason Fat Vampire got turned into a TV series was because a producer happened to be reading on his iPad on a plane, saw the cover, went, "Oh, that's interesting," and read it.
Yeah.
100% luck. Had
Mm.
he, found a book before he got to the page where he saw Johnny's book, that never would have happened. And
Yeah.
Johnny
Uh-huh.
can't control that. But what you
Yeah.
can control is you can control putting out books that you love and that you pour your heart and soul and love into it and your passion and your talent and all the things you've learned.
Yeah.
And maybe the right person reads it at the right time. And then, they're the ones who get a book club to read it. And then all of a sudden the library is like, oh, we got to get more of Trudy's books. And now
Mm.
that's why that series is popular. Who knows, right?
Yeah,
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 right.
exactly.
Yeah, it
And I
is.
do.
Yeah. No, sorry, Trudy. I was just going to say the Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon, same sort of thing. Like it was popular, but it wasn't anywhere near the insane craze that it was a few years back. And I mean, obviously it still is. And it was, and the author at the time had no TikTok or anything like that. And it was a TikTok video of somebody had discovered, and it was a young reader who probably wasn't even born when those books originally came
Yeah.
out. Again, it's just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
yeah.
And to add on to that
Yeah.
whole thing of like writing what you love and pouring your heart and soul into it, the number of times I've seen authors talk about, like even Rebecca Yarros, right? Like she was writing romance and she loved romance, but I heard her talk about it, and actually she was a big fantasy sci-fi reader. And that was her passion, and that was where she wanted to be. And writing Fourth Wing she was taking a chance on that. She was writing the book of her heart. She was writing a book that she was really passionate about, and it just turned out that that was the book. And then Jennifer Armentrout is the same. Like she was writing romance and then just had this crazy idea. I think she was a little bit burnt out. I mean, she was successful as a romance author prior to, but then I want to say, I remember the name of the book. It's something like Blood and Ash. Her series
Oh,
came out, and that yeah,
yeah.
and it was and that was again a book of the heart. Like her publisher didn't want her to write
Yeah.
that book. They wanted her to write another solid romance,
Mm.
which was where she was best. As far as they were
Yeah.
concerned, it was what she was best at. She chose to write this kind of book that was a little bit out there, and it became the bestseller, best-selling book that it is now. So
Yeah.
you just hear it all
So
the
so the
time.
lesson there, I mean, and the thing is people will write books of their heart.
Mm.
And those books will not sell
Yeah.
the way we hoped. We would sell
Yeah.
less than 100 copies. But at least you wrote the book of your heart or the books of your heart.
Yeah.
And when at the end, when you close your eyes that one final time,
Mm.
you did it,
Mm.
right? You
Yeah.
spent time working on something that you really believed in. And so what if only 100 people read it? You
Mm.
probably made their lives better. And that's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And we forget that. I remember this one reader. It was my very first professional sale. Not getting, like a 5 to 8 cents a word was the professional rates back in the day. Very first professional sale was a science fiction story meant for young readers. It was like a grade 4 level reading to be taught in a classroom in the Ontario science classrooms in here in Ontario, Canada. And and I remember getting a letter through the editor from the publisher of a young boy. It was a letter from a teacher, thanking them for my story. Looking through glass, it was just properties of light and stuff, and it was a little, scientist and his nephew working together, and they solved the mystery, and it was kind of fun. And it was based on the scientific principles they were supposed to learn about how light
Mm.
passes through different mediums at different speeds, and that's it. That's the lesson, and then there's a story there.
Yeah.
Well, this was the first story this kid had ever finished reading on his own without being forced to,
Oh,
because he
wow.
loved it so much. And he loved it so
Yeah.
much, he wrote a sequel to it. And the teacher sent me a photocopy of the sequel to the story. And all I can think of is, honestly, this kid probably doesn't remember me, my name or anything. The story is probably still there, that was the first story that turned them into a reader.
Yeah.
And just to think, if I was responsible for turning this young child who is not a reader into a reader, I've
Mm.
opened up a multitude of possibilities for this kid. All of the great books that we've read so many
Yeah.
different, we love books. Think about that. I did that for him.
Mm.
Whether he reads another word of mine again, wow, that's powerful. I've
Mm.
done, I've done it. I've succeeded, right? That you've made a difference, and that's the thing about writing the book of your heart, is
Yeah.
because the right person will pick it up, and you may not make $1 million off it, but you could change their life,
Yeah.
Mm.
and we have that power. The sad thing is we'll mostly never know it,
Yes.
but it does happen all the time.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I think more powerful when you get um, letters or emails from people that have read your book and just say they loved it or got them through
Yeah,
a tough time, or they just, yeah, just fell in love with the characters. And I mean, that's huge, isn't it? That
Hmm.
just
that's
warmed
gigantic.
your heart.
Honestly, I would rather have, I know it sounds weird, but I would rather have regular emails like that
Mhm.
than regularly hitting the top seller ranks.
Yeah.
Because having regular contact like that with people who've been impacted by the things I've written is more important to me as a storyteller.
Mm.
Again, a million sales or a million reads. I'd rather have a million reads. And I'm not talking about page count reads and all that stuff. I'm talking about a million readers, a million people who've read this book is more important to me than $1 million or a million copies sold. That's way more important to me
Yeah.
as a writer. Yes, guys got to eat and pay the rent and stuff like that. So it's not like I'm giving all my stuff away for free, but
Mm.
having the readers is the important thing, and that's one of the reasons I think I love being a storyteller, despite the fact that I've been doing this for over, I guess, 40 years, right, from when I started, and I have yet to have earned more than mid 5 figures a year,
Mm.
right? So I haven't cracked the 6 figure, So I call myself lucky that I haven't had a yes, I've had books that have done well
Mm.
and better than other books. But I've never had a single book take off so that I can look at the last thing I did just before it took off and go, "Ooh, that's the thing. I'm going to go sell that to a million writers."
Yeah.
You know?
Mm.
And that's the thing they need to do because that's what I did. No,
Yeah.
no, that's luck. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, you did cool things and you did really great things, and then luck happened, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So I actually think I'm really lucky that I've never had a breakaway sensation, because the other thing about that is if you have something like that and then you never replicate it, it's devastating, right? You have a book club that does really well, and you do
Mm.
another, like I did this with Chirp Books, like a Chirp audiobook deal. The first Chirp audiobook deal I got on my Canadian Werewolf series, I was like, woo, this is amazing. Yay, I've earned back book one and book two in 2 days. Like, wow, this is great. Like the thousands of dollars that I've earned back instantly.
Yeah.
And then the next one I ran was really good, but it was only half of that.
Mm.
It's really good, and it honestly, it's fantastic. But I was comparing it to the other one, which is twice as big, and so it was kind of like this big success I had was like was not as good as the other one,
Mm.
and that's
Yeah,
the trap we fall into as writers,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
But I sold 100 copies yesterday. Yeah, yeah, but I sold 1,000 last month of that same book when I did a promo. I was like, yeah, but I sold 100
Mm,
to 100 new people,
yeah,
100 new readers. You know what that can mean?
yeah,
Like that's the thing we lose sight of.
Mm.
And that breaks my heart when we
Yeah.
forget to celebrate those wins.
yeah,
Yes, because we compare a lot, don't we? We compare a lot to past success, but also to other people's success, and it
Yeah,
it really doesn't serve you well, does it? It can drag you
no,
down. And yeah, I I think you have to stop that. Don't
yeah.
that's
you?
right.
Cheryl says so. Everyone has to, and that's a gratitude aspect, right? Like being grateful for every single one of those people out there who's taken the time and effort to buy and read one of your
Yeah,
books. That's kind
Mm.
of awesome. Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So, we're coming close to the end of our time, but I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that you see authors doing that, like maybe, no, I don't want it to be negative, but that aren't ideal, and you wish that, they could change,
Yeah.
and how authors maybe should be acting in the 2025 and the things they should be doing.
I hate the fact that I have to say this still, but treating other people with respect and kindness.
Mm.
We we spend so much time behind keyboards and hiding and and that's kind of reduced our humanity in
Mm.
some ways. And somebody who still works with a lot of the players and retailers and the people in the industry as well. There are going to be things that are mistakes.
Mm.
Book Vault is a perfect example.
Mm.
I was hanging out with the folks from Book Vault in Niagara Falls a couple weeks ago, and all I see on social media are authors who have issues. Like, oh, this got misprinted, and this was wrong, and this was the other thing. Never see, oh my God, I got my shipment, and everything's perfect. No one ever takes the time to celebrate those things. So a lot of the look is when you only focus on the negative or you're only become visible to the players, and I remember this from my days at Kobo. When you're only visible with a negative thing, you're going to be associated with negativity. And when opportunity comes up,
Mm.
when they're looking for someone. I remember when I was at Kobo and I was looking, I'm listening to Joanna Penn's podcast, and I knew Joe was wanting to get into short fiction and stuff like that. And lo and behold, this is the serendipity. Someone from marketing comes down and said, "Hey, Mark, you work with a lot of writers. Do you know any writers who you really like Dan Brown style stuff?" And I know Joe is a huge Dan Brown fan, and her series is very much in line with that. And like short stories, could we commission a short story from them? And it was kind of like it's the serendipity. Now,
Mm.
had my encounters, and this is not Joe at all, but had she been the one who was just doing nothing but complaining and stuff, I never would have reached out and said, "Hey, I
Mm,
got a money making opportunity for you. Do you want it?"
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
There's that happens more often than not in the industry is that people are paying attention to how you behave and how you treat others. And when you treat other people poorly and you're a meanie,
Mm.
people are paying attention. Other writers are paying attention and people in the industry are paying attention. And if your name was to come up, oh, they're really good at this, it's like, yeah, but they're a jerk.
yeah,
I'm going to go to the next person.
yeah,
That I know it seems weird, but it's actually, I've seen this work against writers and I've seen it work really well for writers. So that's one thing I want writers to know.
Mm.
The other thing I really think writers need to know is it is so amazing the opportunities we have, right? We have access to things that the previous generations didn't have access to. We have access to tools and resources and knowledge, right? Around the globe, right on the other side of the globe, I can listen to you guys interviewing people, and I can benefit even though we're not in the same time zone, and it's Thursday where you are now, and it's Wednesday here for me. We can still interact and we can learn from one another, and that's beautiful and amazing.
yeah,
But on the downside, is there's so much information that it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I would ask authors to take a step back and say, I've been doing this for 40 years and I still feel overwhelmed.
Mm.
So it's okay that you're overwhelmed. That's never going to go away. So don't wait for the day when you're not going to be overwhelmed with all
Damn
the
it.
things you have to do and learn, right? So take it off in digestible chunks. Do what you can, learn what you can, focus on what's important to you, right? Like if you're a Mac or an Apple person, then maybe focusing on your books on Apple is the thing for you because that's where you're more comfortable, right? Or this genre or whatever it is that works better for you. Focus on those things in small chunks and you'll be able to finish the meal off eventually just by working on the little bits on your plate. Because that can be a real scary thing. And the other thing, and this is a reminder to myself, and I just learned this myself because I was on Canada's West Coast and was doing some mountain hiking, is it's okay to stop and take a breath
Mm.
when you're overwhelmed and out of breath because you've got so much to do and you can't do it all. It is okay. Um, Chances are the timeline that you've manufactured is not the timeline, it's one possible timeline, and you can modify that and change it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Be kind and good to yourself. Stop and take a breath. It's
Mm.
okay.
Yeah.
People, the people, my kids waited for me as the old man was trying to make his way up the mountain. They waited. They kindly waited for me. They were there. And if they didn't love me, they wouldn't have. Right. So, but that's the thing is it's okay. The readers aren't going anywhere. The industry's not going anywhere. That if that book doesn't get released until 6 months or a year later or 2 years later, well, that's I guess what was meant to be. And I think the more important thing is being good to yourself, taking a breath, mental health break as well if you need it, because I would like more writers to be in it for the long run and not burn out too quickly.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
very true. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Take a breath because
Mm.
actually burning yourself out by trying to do everything is the opposite of
Yeah.
getting it
Yeah,
done and getting it
Yeah.
finished. Keeping
Mm.
you,
exactly.
yeah. So I have actually I have written a couple of things down that I wanted to check in with you on. One was,
Yeah.
where is the video of you and your wife doing the stuck
Yes,
in the
I was going to say
house
we need the
video?
link.
Because I'd quite like to go watch
It,
it.
it's on YouTube. I'll send that to you when we
Okay,
finish the
Sure.
recording.
that would be cool. And
It's if you Google if you can spell it Mark Leslie Lefebvre, it's youtube.com/Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Good luck
okay,
spelling that.
I know how to spell
But
it. I've been
I'll give you the
practicing.
link.
I've got it written down. Yeah.
The other one was reactions from readers. And so you talked about wanting reactions from readers, like as a like dramatically when you're reading out the story to people, you can
Yeah.
see the reactions, and even we're getting reactions from like people emailing us and telling us about where else can we, like, I'm thinking like our newsletter, maybe you can get the reactions, like you can, I know I can get analytics from my newsletter and see where people are clicking on there and where they've read and stuff. And I think I saw you mentioned Wattpad. Are they the
Yeah.
kind of places we should be looking for reactions?
Yeah, you know what? Wattpad, a friend of mine who's a really brilliant writer who was getting really frustrated recently just started putting some stuff up on Wattpad. And there's been a handful, I've gotten some reads, but a handful of people really engaged and commenting on everything. And that's all that my friend needed to just feel good
Right.
again as a
Yeah.
writer.
Yeah.
Wattpad is great. I've had some great experiences with them. Yeah, not everyone's going to get turned into a movie and all that stuff, but that's a great place to get to better understand what it is that is resonating.
Mm.
You can also do some other things like with some of the socials, you can do a short reel of a reading from one of your favorite scenes,
Mm.
and you can post, TikTok or Instagram. No, I'm not talking about going viral. I'm talking about the right person goes, "Ooh, this is neat. I want more," or they really like this scene. I've done it with some short dark humor poetry. I do it in live readings as well because there's nothing like hearing the audience react, but I can do it on my Instagram or I can do whatever and I can do these short clips. And even just getting the satisfaction of the likes and the shares and the comments,
Yeah.
sometimes that's all we need to kind of go inflate yourself again because we constantly deflate ourselves.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I hope that gives some ideas as to where you might be able to
Yeah,
get some of these.
they were really
Fantastic
good.
ideas.
I
Thank
was
you.
I hadn't thought about that, the idea of social media as a sounding board. We do use, people talk a lot about using social media as a research place and where to find what people are reading
Yeah.
and what they want, but actually I wasn't thinking about doing it for my own books and stuff. So that's actually a really cool
Yeah, or
place.
even like, or hey, like, my if something like my editor says that I should cut this scene. What do you think? Here, I'm going to read it.
Mm.
And then you're like, oh my God, no, never say that. And they're like, oh, thank you. Okay, good. That's why my editor told me to cut it.
What? All right. And so that were the two things that I want to check in on. And so one last question. What do you want people to think about? What do you want them to take away with them from this interview? Like, what's the one piece of advice, the gold nugget that you're going to give people?
I honestly think that there is no guarantee. There is a guarantee if you finish your book that your book will be finished. That's the guarantee. Everything else is up in the air. So enjoy the process as much as you can.
Mm.
Don't beat yourself up. Most books are not going to have sold a lot of copies. So if you've already sold more than 100 copies of anything, you're actually far more successful than you're giving yourself credit for. And I've often said patience, practice, and persistence are three of the hallmarks of successful writers. Very consistent if you look at those three traits. Keep writing, keep doing it, because the more you write, the better you get at writing, right? You just keep practicing and working at it and working at it and continuing to learn, and then just being persistent. Because, it was Hugh Howey's 10th book that was the breakaway bestseller. It was Bella Andre's book about the Sullivans. After publishing numerous books with a traditional publisher, that her editor said, no one ever wants to read about the Sullivans. And then she self-published it and then became a bazillionaire.
Yeah.
It's those things that, and that was because the reader believed in something. Maybe passion and persistence would be those two really important P's right there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love it. Perfect. That is a perfect way to end the interview. So, Mark, if someone wants to reach out and contact you, where's the best place to find you?
If you go to markleslie.ca, you can find out my links to my socials and stuff. There's even a form if you want to get in contact with me there.
Mhm.
And heck, I even do free consultations with anyone who wants to just pick my brain for 20 minutes.
Yeah. And then you've got the podcast as well, Stark Reflections.
Yeah, and that's linkable from there, starkreflections.ca. I'm going on only 8 years with this podcast, so not
Oh,
10.
you're a baby. You're a baby.
I have to catch up. I have to catch up. Slow
Yeah.
down. I have to catch up with you.
Yeah. We'll stop recording for a couple of years. It'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. There we go. There we go.
Awesome. And where can we be found, Shah?
We can be found at spargirlspodcast.com, and we are on Patreon if you'd like to come and join our merry tribe on our Facebook group for authors.
Perfect. So thank you again, Mark, for joining us on the podcast. And thank you to all of our listeners for joining us for another episode of the Spa Girls podcast. We'll be back again next week with another episode. But for now, farewell.
Bye.
Okay, bye.